Good afternoon. I'm great. It's truly an honor to be here, to be a part of this really important, illustrious event. Um, Marcus Garvey's legacy is still being explored and understood in really important ways. It's hard to speak of Garvey in 10 minutes, because to speak of Garvey is to speak of the black world in the 1920s. To speak of Garvey is to speak about the ideas of back to Africa, Pan-Africanism, that extends in the 19th century. To speak of Garvey is to talk about African resistance to systems of enslavement. Garvey himself would say he was a descendant of the Maroons. To speak of Garvey is to speak of black thought, of black men and black women that transfers into the 20th century, but it's these older ideas. Garvey's genius was his ability to build the world's most expensive black mass movement of the likes we have never seen since. The Negro World, for example, this amazing document, this newspaper that's not only written in English, but also French and Spanish, travels across the world as contraband material, which speaks to the assault on Garvey and the literature of Garvey and Garveyites for speaking about black unity, for speaking about the need for black people, like other populations across the world, had a right to self-determination. Some of these ideas will come during the civil rights struggle, will come through as commonplace ideas that organizations like the United Nations would speak for, the right of colonized peoples to have freedom. This is what Garvey was speaking about. The UNIA was this amazing organization. One of the reasons because it was family-based. It had a juvenile wing, very family organization that spread across the world, not just United States. Cuba, for example, had the most branches of the UNIA outside the United States. Within America, while the UNIA is seen as a New York-based African-American idea, or West Indian idea, is really much more expensive. Louisiana actually had the most chapters of the UNIA in America. Garvey hasn't reached Africa. You see UNIA chapters being formed in Southern Africa and being attacked by the apartheid-like regimes, also in what would now be Rhodesia, living right now is Zimbabwe. Garvey reaches Australia. In 1920, Fred Maynard forms an organization called the Aborigine Australian Progressive Association, very much on the lines of the UNIA. They had tried to form a branch in Sydney through correspondence with Amy Jacques Garvey, who, when we speak of Garvey, must also be mentioned, as well as the number of other Garveyites who were also assaulted by the state and couldn't travel. They had passports revoked, visas denied, all these things that we look at now as being an assault on the rights of human beings. But the UNIA became this organization that these tactics of denial and assault are being practiced on in some way. As we know, the FBI's first black informant was used to infiltrate the UNIA, and the tactics that we used to attack the UNIA were really out of bounds. But it's not unexpected, because the Garvey movement had this really phenomenal ability to galvanize black energy, black ideas for freedom. But back to Australia. This speaks to me to a lot about why Garvey was so powerful. The Aborigine Progressive Association took its motto, one God, one aim, one destiny, which we know now that's Garvey. Through Garvey, we see people galvanizing around the attacks on Ethiopia by Italy in the 1930s, particularly through Garvey's paper, The Black Man. When we heard the words of Bob Marley, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery, for none but ourselves can free our minds, that's a straight quote from Marcus Garvey. His legacy has been ever present. Garvey's fueled so many other organizations, from the Nation of Islam, people like Septima Clark, this phenomenal educator in Louisiana, or South Carolina rather, speaks about seeing a Black Star Line coming into Charleston harbors in the 1920s and being really blown and transformed by this process. We still have Garveyites in places like Costa Rica. Still remember this promised ship that entered this space. Garvey still lives with us in many ways. And so I think this event is really important, not just for the historical dynamic of how I look at Garvey, but as was stated, it's now a time to right the wrongs. Decades of scholarship, and there's a re-emergence of Garvey studies that is understanding the impact of Garvey across the world, clearly attests to the fact that this was a movement of liberation, this was a movement of legitimized struggle that should be seen as such. If we can speak of these things openly and have conferences on the UNIA, a multitude of books, scholars winning all kinds of prestigious awards for Garvey, then we should also address some of these same issues, I think, from a legal perspective. I think I'll end my comments with that. Thank you so much.